Someone has come out and shared their experience with being assaulted, and the ones receiving the most heat had nothing to do with it. And this is largely thanks to an increasingly infamous commentary creator who has once more blindly spread false information in order to help a friend with their vendetta. Though that's getting ahead of myself. Of course, this is referring to recent events involving Matt and Ryan, the comedic duo that makes up SuperMega. Because what started with someone sharing their experience with SA has now snowballed into an absolute fiasco, featuring over half a dozen creators, each with their own videos, each with their own agendas, and no shortage of contradictions, to the point that over a month after this situation broke, people are still asking what the hell happened and what conclusions can be drawn from the hours of videos, tweets, and streams. So let's start at the beginning. A creator by the name of updog uploaded a now unlisted 2-hour video sharing her experiences with being assaulted, as well as subsequent events that unfolded in her friendship with Matt and Ryan in 2022. In fact, most of the video was about that friendship, and that would logically draw you to the conclusion that the duo was somehow involved in the assault, right? Well, no, actually, they had nothing to do with it. They were for sure linked to it as it happened in their office with their former employee, but in terms of being actually involved, they weren't. And surprisingly, the assault is the part of the situation that is most cut and dry, as the alleged assaulter, Don, hasn't really tried to deny it. And while he provided his perspective on the events, he ultimately landed on apologizing. So what's more surprising is how the conversation became so focused on Matt and Ryan. And as far as their handling of the assault goes, Lex's main grievances were that after they learned of the incident, Matt and Ryan made Lex feel put on the spot by asking various questions about the event, including how she wanted them to handle Don as employers. And at one point, they encouraged Don and Lex to talk this out, which is obviously not the best situation to put a victim in. Furthermore, the duo stated they had concerns about how this could affect their brand, and at times took a few days to respond to things. Separately, one of their employees responded to Lex opening up about the assault by making out with her, which, ew. Also, Matt and Ryan have been widely accused of trying to cover up the assault, even though that's not what happened. At all, but I'll get to that. But there are multiple moments where, yeah, Matt and Ryan did not handle the situation as well as they could have, which they would later admit and apologize for. But none of this sounds like it could fill a 2-hour upload, right? Well, that's because it didn't. To put it simply, the majority of Lex's video had me asking, why am I hearing about this? Honestly, so much of the video felt so inappropriate and irrelevant to me that I don't understand her goal in making it. For starters, Lex repeatedly brought up personal information about people and events that had nothing to do with her.
One of which was a girl that Matt cheated on his girlfriend with. He also takes a break with the new girlfriend he's with to basically solicit a sex worker girl, Rav. He's still so broken about his ex attempting to take her life.
Not to mention that nearly all of the unrelated claims were later revealed to be straight up false, though I'll get to that. And at one point, she alleges that Matt said his close friend was a coward for committing suicide, and that Matt and Ryan often joked about the event inappropriately, all of which they denied. But either way, part of grieving is often anger, and humor is a common coping mechanism. It came out that Ryan was the one to discover the friend after their successful attempt. So even if they were callous about the topic, nitpicking someone's grieving process, especially with such trauma involved, to hundreds of thousands of people sucks a lot. People are messy, especially when you're seeing them at their absolute lowest because they trusted you. And at one point, Lex even takes a shot at them by saying this.
Person who's dealing with suicide attempts. I don't know. I know you guys don't give a shit about either of those things, obviously.
Which is such a low blow that should have obviously been off limits. Matt also shared that his ex and current girlfriends are both receiving harassment because of how they were mentioned in Lex's video, despite having nothing to do with Lex at all.
They are both being harassed viciously, and their personal lives are being used as weapons to make me look worse.
Then Nickisnotgreen made all of this exponentially worse, but I'll get to that. And what also rubbed me the wrong way is that a significant portion of the video was Lex saying some variation of, Matt and Ryan were doing me some huge favor, but it wasn't enough for me.
They let me stay at their place. They weren't charging me rent. They said I could stay there. The office is dirty. I'm doing stuff that maids get paid to do on my free time. Matt offered to pay for me to live somewhere. That's at least $10K. I felt weirded out that he did that. He was saying this so I could live alone in LA, specifically apartment money for me to live alone. I didn't get my stuff out of the office until all of my stuff out of the office until September 6th. So while we were trying to go get our stuff, they decided that was a good idea to put a Ring camera in. So what? I guess we couldn't get our stuff?
I don't know, it just seemed like a weird focus to me. And while Lex's friend Rav received similar accommodations and affirmed the tensions described by Lex, the pair have been called entitled for this perspective. And as Matt revealed, Lex Lex seemed to leave out crucial information that hurt her narrative even more, such as Lex arranging to pick up her belongings from the SuperMega office and then flaking without notice. Yet in her video, Lex insists that she was desperate to collect her belongings and the guys kept putting it off out of cruelty or indifference.
I can't get my computer, I can't get my extra clothes that I have in California, anything. I just can't function, and because he's talking to Alex Ernst. He's making a video with Alex Ernst today, sorry.
Also, at numerous points, Lex criticizes SuperMega for specific things where she fails to hold herself to the same standard. For example, while she crashed at their office, she felt upset that they seemed to want her out, but didn't provide an exact date on when she had to leave, presumably because they didn't want to kick out their friend during a difficult time. But despite that, Lex doesn't mention trying to clear any of this up.
So we just offered ourselves to just leave, because we had a feeling that it was going to happen anyway.
So they're bad for not being mind readers? Also, Lex and Nickisnotgreen have blamed the duo for making her homeless.
My only safe place didn't want to help me, said they did nothing but helped me, and then gaslit me about it and made me homeless.
Lex and Rav were robbed 2 different times while being homeless, keeping their belongings in a car because they had no other choice at the time.
Again, they gave her free housing, offered to pay for a new apartment, and she chose to turn all this down. That's the exact opposite. Also, she describes being hurt by how much Matt and Ryan seem to focus on how these events could impact their brand, but Lex also freely states that the first time a member of SuperMega acknowledged the assault in writing, her first thought was that she could now use it to screw them over.
So I remember when I wrote this, I was like, oh, so I could just show this to anyone. I was like, you're so mad, you yourself.
This whole situation proved those fears right, even if they should have been much more tactful. And I've said this before, but I don't like when personal conflicts are just brought to the internet unless you have reasonable suspicion of abusive behavior continuing and there's no other solution, which in this case is not any of that. This ultimately sounds like a bad friendship that came to a natural conclusion, yet cost Matt and Ryan 60,000 subscribers and their reputation. And the assault is basically just a footnote in the video. Lex even says that her motivation in making it was to get everything off of her chest.
I'm just talking about stuff that happened to me because it's important to me to get this off my chest.
Which is the excuse people always use when they use the internet to send a mob after someone they had a falling out with. But if that's what you need, go to therapy, start journaling, confide in a friend, or make the video and don't post it. Catharsis is fine to seek, but not when you're really just disguising a personal grudge. Hell, she even says at one point that her actions all have context while Matt and Ryan's don't, which proves that they're evil.
But everything I say has an explanation. Every action has a context that comes before it, that had a bad thing that happened before it that made me react the way it did. What do they have?
Yeah, that's how that works. When only you share your side, only your side is out there. That doesn't mean you're automatically right just because you spoke first. What? But all this became much, much worse because of Nick Green. Nick is a fellow commentary creator on YouTube that I've called sloppy and amateur before, and I'm not exactly reversing my position now. So far, Nick has made 2 videos on Lex and SuperMega. One where he rushed to put something out before they could respond, which caused Nick's video to be filled with inaccuracies and false accusations, while he trivialized the assault and mindlessly spread rumors. And a second video where he mostly walks back his original coverage, while ultimately admitting that this whole situation is more likely due to miscommunication than malice.
I also think there were a lot of instances where there was heavy miscommunication, and I do feel like a lot of the receipts they brought to the table make it easier to understand where they're coming from.
Yet Nick just had to jump the gun, and he hasn't even apologized. And well over a month later, he's still receiving backlash for misleading hundreds of thousands of people in order to help Lex, his close friend. See, at least when he's personally invested in a situation, Nick has a habit of getting really careless with his coverage, and this manifests primarily in 2 ways. One, he draws conclusions or opinions without disclosing that that's what he's doing. In other words, he just states whatever he wants as fact. And 2, he relies heavily on knowing someone to grant him authority on a conflict despite not witnessing a single relevant event, and instead being told these things by very biased individuals without ever getting the full story. And that recklessness is exactly what happened with Nick's coverage of this situation. For starters, other people have come out with accusations against Matt and Ryan, accusations that have since almost all been debunked. And Nick Green carelessly reads out Reddit threads that recap the accusations without reviewing the videos himself, and in doing so, Nick involved people who had nothing to do with the situation and caused them to receive significant harassment. And if that sounds like a reach, Nick goes out of his way to show Matt's girlfriend's Instagram and her receiving hate comments despite having nothing to do with any of this. Even worse, Matt says that they had never publicly disclosed their relationship, meaning Nick basically helped dox her. Furthermore, Nick shared tweets from said girlfriend's private Twitter where she vents about the situation and Nick causing her to be harassed. So Nick just decides that Matt feels the same exact way as his girlfriend.
Overall, you can tell that she is not happy about it, and I can come to a conclusion about how Matt feels about it.
Yeah, leave it to the super performative male feminist to assume that all women must have the same opinions as their boyfriends, and it's okay to dox a woman because of unfounded rumors about her boyfriend. Way to go, bud. And to me, it honestly felt like Nick was throwing as many things against the wall as possible to force Matt and Ryan to go away. And eventually, Matt provided evidence that even Nick admitted was compelling that the accusers were either lying or misinformed.
And I do think that Matt says some things about Layden in here that don't make him look great about the situation. But I don't know if this is a strong point for Layden's case.
This included Layton, a disgruntled ex-employee, and Morgpie, a consensual fling partner with whom things fizzled out when Matt got into a relationship. And I gotta say, it's troubling to see Nick blindly grasping at any straw in the hopes to take SuperMega down with zero concern for getting his facts straight. And if you won't take my word for it that that's what he was doing, maybe you'll take his.
Of course, I'm gonna take the side of a personal friend of mine when she comes out with a story about her own sexual assault. This isn't like an online, like normal thing where I look at all the facts and I make a decision. No.
Say what you will, but I find it very strange that Nick also just glosses over the person that assaulted Lex, because this only further helped the story become about everything other than the assault.
I do have some issues with the way I covered the story on Saturday. I do regret taking focus away from Lex's story.
SuperMega lost 60,000 subscribers, and Nick is no small part of the reason why. And while Nick has somewhat acknowledged his reckless handling of this in his follow-up video, his original video is still up and these problematic segments have not been removed well over a month later. And it's funny because Nick has the nerve to say this.
All I really want is for the victims in the story to be heard and to have a voice.
Yet he couldn't be bothered to watch most of the videos he covered. Nick also echoes the sentiment that SuperMega tried to cover up the assault, only all that has been alleged was that SuperMega didn't post about the assault publicly and didn't gossip about it with their employees.
It's hard for me to completely understand where they're coming from when they say they weren't trying to cover up a sexual assault.
All I wanted was them to make a statement, at least just to say that he assaulted someone. We're not working with him anymore.
All she wanted from SuperMega was for them to make a post about why they were letting Don go after so much time.
Which I feel like it's a reasonable assumption that your company won't be responsible for publicly announcing a friend's assault, especially since Lex didn't ask them to. And Lex and Nick both criticized the guys for asking her how to handle the situation, meaning they couldn't have gotten her input here. And Lex had expressed not wanting the situation to become a big deal.
I don't want this in a text. I don't want this screenshotable. I don't want this to be a big thing.
We never stated our reasoning for cutting contact with Dawn or removing him as the channel artist because Lex had not publicly talked about this, and she expressed that she did not want this to be a thing that was public.
Which SuperMega tweeting about it would have made it exactly that. In other words, it's a situation where no matter what they do, there's an angle from which you could criticize SuperMega's response, either for removing agency from a victim and telling their own story, putting her on the spot by involving her, or by covering it up if they handled it privately. And none of that is actually talking about the assaulter. And what bothers me so much is that Nick acts like he can be the gatekeeper of proper conduct, yet he never even suggests what the proper courses of action would have been. He just says they're bad because Lex didn't like something without providing any kind of insight, almost like it was an impossible situation. And in Nick's conclusion monologue, he says this.
I think it's time for some people to be held accountable, and I think it's time for people to take some real action on creators who continually take advantage of the people around them and the people they hire.
Wait, who did they take advantage of? They owed Lex nothing, and her grievances were that they didn't do enough as they gave her months of free housing, offered her tens of thousands of dollars, among multiple other favors. Or are you referring to the two people whose videos you couldn't even be bothered to watch? And this is exactly what I'm talking about. Nick starts taking such huge leaps and drawing the randomest conclusion while acting like every word out of his mouth is fact. I just find it so reckless given his level of influence. And while Nick insists that vendettas are beneath him,
But I have a real job. with a real schedule that I keep up for my audience, and I don't make videos for personal vendettas.
I think both his and Lex's actions clearly show a vendetta at play. And if it sounds problematic for me to speculate about intention, Lex literally participated in a stream that was celebrating SuperMega's downfall.
SuperMega lost like how many thousands of subscribers? Like 30,000 already?
SuperMega will take the W. They're taking their time, that's for sure.
I've already said my piece. They can take whatever they want, whatever letter of the alphabet they prefer.
And at multiple points, Nick goes for personal insults against Matt and Ryan, both in terms of their views and as boxers.
SuperMega has actually fallen below 1 million subscribers on YouTube. They were just hovering above 1 million for a very long time because they weren't gaining many fans. They don't have it anymore. Obviously, none of this has an effect on how he treats people, but of course, if his art sucks, let's can dunk on him.
Yeah, nothing says anti-vendetta like relishing in the misfortune of others. And what I don't understand is if Nick really wanted to support the victim, why not be her friend and give her an outlet other than making the video? Almost like that wouldn't make a public spectacle about how good of a person Nick is. This whole situation feels so childish and gross to me. It sounds like SuperMega aren't perfect people. Cool. Is that all it takes to have your name publicly dragged through the mud and blamed for the trauma of an assault, all while truth is optional? And with this whole fiasco, Matt and Ryan released separate responses that have largely turned around public opinion because they came prepared. Matt's video was released first and was a comprehensive response to every former associate that spoke out against him. To review, that included Lex and her now boyfriend Ethan, Lex's friend Rev, Morgpie who had a consensual fling with Matt, Leighton, a disgruntled ex-employee, and honorable mention to Nick, who just inserted himself for no reason. And Matt's video featured screenshots and evidence to show that a lot of the accusations from certain parties were insincere. For example, Leighton cried harassment after the guys exposed themselves to him, despite Leighton doing the same thing unprompted during a podcast.
Somebody's putting on
Do you see his balls? Leighton, you want to come take a seat? Do you see his balls?
Implying that this kind of humor was completely mutual, or being made severely uncomfortable by jokes about his sexuality, but texts were released of Leighton explicitly encouraging them, or Morgpie speculating that Matt was cheating on his current girlfriend with her, despite that not being the case. All claims, by the way, that Nick mindlessly echoed and assumed were factual. But as it pertains to Lex, Matt was praised for accepting accountability really well, even by Nick.
I understand that they take accountability for a lot of that, and I do appreciate that. I do think that Matt and Ryan own up to a lot of the truly awful shit they did, and I think that was good.
He also provided context for multiple instances where he messed up most severely. Basically, the video largely came down to, I screwed up on multiple occasions because I wasn't equipped to deal with something of this magnitude, and I'm sorry. But Matt also shows confusion at Lex coming forward with the tone that she did, as a lot of these conflicts had already been ironed out either in person or via text.
Lex came over to my place. In this conversation, I sincerely apologized to Lex. I admitted where I was wrong and I took responsibility. I expressed remorse for how I had acted during the situation, and she accepted my apology. This is why I ultimately found myself a bit confused as to why there's a notion that I have never addressed this with Lex, because I have. Then on my birthday, she texted me, "Happy birthday, Matt. I love you. Hope your day is great." I thought that after I apologized to her last July, things had smoothed out, and I think you could see why I would think that.
In fact, this was a trend with the accusers.
Rav and I, apologized to each other and made up, which again is why I found myself very confused when Rav said what he did on Twitter recently. I was very surprised to hear what Morgan had to say on stream, considering last month in June, we had a very pleasant conversation where we tied up any loose ends and smoothed everything out. I 100% understand if you guys are ready for me to leave SuperMega and let someone else take care of my responsibilities. It's not fair to you two that I keep screwing up. So yes, as you can see, Leighton was aware of his performance and the issues that were taking place with his job, and we were not looking for any reason to fire him.
Which further begs the question of, what was the point of any of this if not just to take down Matt and Ryan out of spite? And both Matt and Ryan showed disgust and anger at Lex weaponizing very personal and intimate bits of their lives with possible lies.
I have done enough to tarnish my image, but I will not stand by and let someone talk lies about the way I talked or treated my trauma in regards to Daniel.
The second thing is that Lex brought up personal details about my personal relationships and sex life. There was absolutely nothing that warranted divulging that information.
Which again, I get. It must feel incredibly violating to watch someone unpack your life like that for no reason other than they could. And Ryan's video was much shorter as he focused much more on apologizing than refuting. Among what I've discussed, there were also claims that came out of Ryan sexting with adult fans, which yeah, is kinda gross, but there's not much else to say on it. But overall, these responses have been pretty well received, with people expressing support for the duo going forward, and the guys have stopped losing subscribers. Though on that note, the duo has expressed an uncertain future for SuperMega, where they are undecided on if they want to return as content creators. And my overall take on this is just why? Like, I think where I'm at is that Lex most likely is a victim of assault and was let down by Matt and Ryan in her time of need, but that doesn't excuse the fact that her public actions involving them were unnecessary, bordering on cruel. Those things can both be true. And it's perfectly valid for Lex to have mixed feelings about this as a friend, but where you lose me is when you go online and start dragging them because when put in an impossible situation, they didn't score a perfect 10, especially when this was all ironed out in private. All I know is I hate this trend of people's low points being amplified to millions because they aren't at their best at their low points, and apparently it's perfectly fine to do that so long as they happen to have a following. It's just becoming increasingly common for creators to weaponize people's goodwill in order to act on personal vendettas. But that's the world we now live in, and I need to adjust accordingly and not take any chances. So what I'm gonna do is just sit here and breathe. No way that could come back to bite me, right?
You're literally breathing air that someone else could be using right now.
Wait, no! Yeah, that's about right. Bye!